All right, today's lesson is on 3D geometry. So when we talk about 3D geometry, we are talking about figures that have 3 dimensions. So anything that you can, that is a solid basically. So like a cylinder, a cone is an example, like an ice cream cone if you were to fill it up. That would be an example of a 3D solid. A sphere, right? Anything that's circular. So an example of a sphere would be a ball. We are only going to be talking about the volume, the amount of space that this solid can hold inside of it. That's what the volume is. In order to be able to do today's lesson, you need to have a calculator with you. So make sure that you have something that you can calculate your answers on. So we need to write down what the formulas are for the volume of a cylinder, a cone, and a sphere. Now remember, this R right here is the radius. It is from the center to the outside of the circular part of your cylinder right here, which is called the base of your cylinder. And the H right here represents the height of your cylinder, how high your cylinder went up. Now, in class, we are going to talk about where these formulas came from. So when we talk about it, you'll understand why these formulas are the way they are. For right now, we're just going to get the formulas down. And next time I see you, you will understand why the formulas are what they are. So the volume of a cylinder is going to be pi r squared h. Now I want you to think about it and see if you can figure out why is the formula for the volume of a cylinder this. Okay, if you think about it a little bit, I think you could figure it out. Okay, so now the next thing we're going to talk about is the volume of a cone. So for a cone, the volume is 1/3 pi r squared h. And for this one right here, you might even be able to figure out why the volume of a cone is 1/3 pi r squared h. It has to do with the fact that the volume of a cylinder is pi r squared h. All right. And then lastly, we're going to talk about the volume of a sphere, which is 4/3 pi r cubed. And yes, you are going to have to know all of these formulas. All right. So let's go ahead and apply your information to these questions. In number 1, it says find the volume of a cylinder. So that's important because otherwise you won't know which formula to use. That has a height of 30 inches and a radius of 4 inches. So every time you have a problem like this, I want you to always write out what is the H and what is the R. So the H is 30 inches and the R is 4 inches. And I'm going to use the formula for the volume of a cylinder. So go ahead and look back at what the formula for the volume of a cylinder is and write it down. See if you get it right. Okay, so the volume of a cylinder should be pi r squared h. Okay, then it says to express your answer in 2 ways. I'm going to express it as an exact answer and rounded to the nearest whole number. So I'm going to have 2 answers reported, but they are equivalent to each other. So let's go ahead and plug our information in. I know the radius is 4 inches, and I know that the height is 30 inches. So I'm just literally going to plug it into my formula. So volume equals pi times r, which is 4 squared, times h, which is 30. All right. So then I just follow order of operations. I have all sorts of multiplication here, but I also have exponents. So I'm going to make sure I do my exponents first. So when I square the 4, I end up getting 16. So this will be v equals pi times 16 times 30. Okay, now as an exact answer, if you remember, pi is an irrational number, which means it will go on forever and ever and ever. It will never terminate. So my number can get very ugly very fast. So as an exact answer, I don't want to multiply by pi and figure out what it is with a decimal. I'm just going to multiply 16 by 30. So go ahead and multiply 16 by 30, see what you get. You should end up getting 480. So this means that my answer as an exact answer would be 480 pi. Remember, I don't want to multiply out by pi because if I do, I'm eventually going to have to round because there's no way that I could write out every single possible digit for this answer. So my answer right here would be 480 pi inches cubed because it's a 3-dimensional figure, And that's my exact answer. So I want you to label that this is the exact answer. All right. But then it also asks you, so we'll call this A. So this is the answer to part A. But it also asks you to find the answer rounded to the nearest whole number. So we'll call that part B. And I'm going to have you figure out what this answer is rounded to the nearest whole number. So what you need to do is you need to grab your calculator and you need to literally just type in what this says, 480 times pi. So on your calculator, let's figure this out. 480 times, this is what my pi button looks like right here. Make sure you get 3.14159, so on and so forth when you press it on your calculator. Press enter. I end up getting 1,507.9644, blah, 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 blah. Because it asked me to round to the nearest whole number, I'm going to go to the ones digit, which is a 7. I'm going to see what comes after the 7, which is a 9. If it's 5 or above, it means I should give it a shove. So this 9 is 5 or above, which means I have to give this 7 a shove, which means that this 7 will round up to an 8. So my volume rounded to the nearest whole number would be 1,508 inches cubed. Okay, and this is not my exact answer because I had to round it. It would have gone on forever if I wanted to write out my exact answer, which is why I would leave it in terms of pi for my exact answer. All right, so let's look at example number 2 and let's underline key information. Find the volume of a cone, so this time it's a cone and not a cylinder, that has a height of 30 inches and a radius of 4 inches. Express your answer 2 ways: as an exact answer, so this is going to be the answer to part A, and then as an answer rounded to the nearest. This should say thousandth. Cross off the word whole. Okay, so this is part B. Okay, all right, so please write down the information that's given to you. You know that the height is 30 inches, and then you also know that the radius is 4 inches. Okay, so let me just write this down again, that this is an A and not a 4, because I know it looks like a 4. All right, so write down the right formula, see if you get it right. Okay, so I should be using V equals 1/3 pi r squared h. Okay, so I know that the volume is going to be 1/3 pi multiplied by the radius, which is 4 squared, the radius squared, multiplied by the height, which is 30. Same thing that I had to do before. I have to use order of operations, so I have multiplication, and I also have exponents. So I'm going to do my exponents first. So I get V equals 1/3 pi times 16 times 30. Okay, and then I'm going to go ahead and figure out what 16 times 30 is. So I get volume equals 1/3 pi times 480. All right, I haven't figured out what all of the numbers are without the pi when I multiply it together. So I'm going to multiply 1/3 by 480. So remember, you're just going to do 480. And when you're just taking a third of a number, you're just basically dividing it by 3. So go ahead and divide 480 by 3, see what you get. You should end up getting volume equals 160 pi. Okay, and remember it's an exact answer, which means you leave it in terms of pi, and then inches cubed, because again it's a 3D shape. So this is my answer to part A. Part B, all I have to do is figure out what this number is in my calculator. So I can say volume equals, let's see what it says in our calculator. So I'm going to take 160, multiply it by pi, and I end up getting this crazy wacky number right here, but I need to round it to the nearest thousandth. So if you look at your number, here's the tenths, here's the hundredths, here's the thousandths. You have the digit 4. What comes after the 4 is an 8. So because this is 5 or above, I got to give this 4 a shove, so this 4 becomes a 5. So that means that my volume is 502 0.655 inches cubed. All right, notice how question number 3 is about a sphere. So find the volume of a sphere that has a radius of 3 inches. Now with a sphere, we don't worry about a height because the sphere is just a ball, right? So the height is just basically related to the radius, so we don't have to worry about it because the radius is all the information that we need. And then it says express your answer in 2 ways, again, as an exact answer. So this is going to be A, and then B, rounded to the nearest hundredth. I do not want you to pick your calculator up for this problem until we get to part B. So let's do part A, and the only information that I am given is that the radius is 3 inches. So go ahead and figure out what formula you're going to use. See if you're right. So I'm going to use volume equals 4/3 pi r cubed, and that means that I'm going to say 4/3 pi, and then I'm going to use 3 cubed. Okay, so again, I don't want you to use a calculator for this. I want you to just figure out what is 3 cubed. So it's 3 times 3 times 3, so it gives you 9 times 3, which is 27. So I know that this value right here will end up being a 27. So I'm going to say volume equals 4/3 pi times 27. Okay, now next thing I need to do is figure out what is 4/3 multiplied by 27. So I'm going to use my calculator, or excuse me, I'm not going to use my calculator, I'm going to use my brain, and I'm going to figure out what is 4/3 times 27. So 4/3 times 27 over 1. So you end up getting 108 over 3. I figured out what 27 times 4 was, which is 108. 3 times 1, which is 3. Divide those two numbers, and I end up getting 36. All right? So this means that my exact answer is going to be 36 pi inches cubed. All right? And this is my answer as an exact answer, because remember, if you want to know the exact answer, you can't round, and if I multiply by pi, I will end up having to round. So the last thing that I have to do is just figure out what it is to the nearest hundredth, part B. So to do that, I just figure out what 36 times pi is. So let's go ahead and figure that out. 36 times pi. And then it asks me to round to the nearest hundredth. Now listen really carefully, because the rounding for this problem is a little tricky. I'm going to look at the hundredths place, which is this 9 right here. Then I'm going to look at what comes after it. It's a 7. Because it's 5 or above, I got to give this 9 a shove. But this 9, because it's a single digit, can't go up any higher. So this becomes a 0, and this tenths place now becomes a 1. So rounded to the nearest hundredth, my volume would be 113.10 inches cubed. All right? I hope you have a great rest of your day.